Hello, and welcome to the M.O.W. channel. Today's case file begins with the story of Drew Walter Peterson, a convicted murderer who killed his wife and a former sergeant with the Bolingbrook Police Department in Illinois. Please don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. Now, let's begin today's case file. Drew Walter Peterson was born in 1954 in Bolingbrook, Illinois, a suburb of Chicago. He graduated from Willowbrook High School in 1972, received training as a military police officer in the U.S. Army, and joined the Bolingbrook Police Department in 1977, beginning his law enforcement career. Over the next 30 years, he served as a police sergeant and even received the Officer of the Year award in 1979. On the surface, he appeared to be a respected law enforcement officer trusted by his community. However, behind this public image was a deeply troubled and dark private life, marked by repeated marriages and severe domestic conflict. Peterson's first marriage was to his high school sweetheart, Carol Brown, but it ended after 6 years due to his infidelity. His second marriage, to Victoria Vicky Connolly, was also plagued by domestic violence. Connolly later testified in court that Peterson had threatened her, saying he knew how to kill her and make it look like an accident, revealing his disturbing and violent nature. Connolly eventually ended the marriage after discovering Peterson's affair with his third wife, Kathleen Savio. These repeated personal scandals were widely known among his colleagues, but because of his rank and influence within the police department, they were largely ignored. Peterson's third marriage, to accountant Kathleen Savio, was the most violent and unstable of all. Between 2002 and 2004, police were called to their home 18 times for domestic disturbance reports. Just months after their divorce was finalized on October 10, 2003, Savio was found naked and dead in her bathtub on March 1, 2004. Despite clear signs of injury including a deep head wound and bruises on her body, a coroner's jury that included officers who personally knew Peterson ruled her death an accidental drowning. Shortly after Savio's death, Peterson quickly sold the house and never informed the new owners about what had happened there. These suspicious circumstances and his unusual behavior would later become the foundation for a major reinvestigation. Just 8 days after his divorce from Savio was finalized, on October 18, 2003, the 49-year-old Peterson married Stacey Ann Kales, a 19-year-old hotel receptionist, becoming his fourth wife. Stacey was often described as a troubled young woman, and had begun dating Peterson with her father's permission at a time when Peterson was still legally married to Savio. Stacey raised Savio's 2 sons as her own and later gave birth to 2 children, with Peterson becoming the mother of 4 children in total. At the time of her disappearance, Stacey was close to completing her nursing degree and was living what appeared to be a quiet life as a student and homemaker. On the surface, it seemed that Drew Peterson had neatly closed the chapter on the Savio case and started a new life with his much younger wife, but that illusion shattered on Sunday, October 28, 2007, when Stacey Ann Peterson vanished without a trace. Immediately after her disappearance, Peterson told the media that Stacey had fallen in love with another man and left voluntarily, abandoning her Pontiac Grand Am at Bolingbrook's Clough International Airport. However, Stacey's family and friends firmly rejected this claim, insisting she would never abandon her young children. Prior to her disappearance, Stacey had confided in her sister, Cassandra Kales, that her relationship with Peterson had become extremely dangerous and that she was preparing for divorce. When Cassandra could not reach her sister the following morning, she officially reported Stacey missing. Because the case involved the disappearance of a former police officer's wife, it quickly drew national attention. The Illinois State Police and the FBI launched a joint investigation, and search warrants were executed on Peterson's home and vehicles. Neighbors reported seeing Peterson and another man moving a 55-gallon drum, large enough to hold a person, out of the house shortly after Stacey disappeared. Peterson's longtime friend, Rick Mims, told police that he had gone with Peterson to purchase 3 large blue plastic containers. These circumstantial details strongly suggested that Peterson was not a grieving husband who had been abandoned, but rather the central suspect in his wife's disappearance. In November 2007, at the age of 53, Peterson retired from the police department and began collecting his pension, but the suspicion surrounding Stacey's disappearance continued to follow him relentlessly. At this point, the case had grown beyond the mystery of the missing woman and evolved into a sweeping re-examination of Drew Peterson's past and the deaths and disappearances connected to him. The disappearance of Stacey Peterson completely changed the focus of the investigation into Drew Peterson, a former sergeant with the Bolingbrook Police Department. What began as a routine missing person case quickly took a different direction when Stacy's body was never found, and Peterson refused to cooperate with investigators. As a result, police were inevitably drawn back to a 3-year-old mystery: the 2004 death of Peterson's third wife, Kathleen Savio. At the time, Savio's death had been ruled an accidental drowning. However, suspicion was reignited when it became known that, before she disappeared, Stacy had told friends and family that Peterson had murdered Savio and staged it as an accident, and that she herself was afraid of her husband. At the request of Savio's family and Fox News, former New York City medical examiner Drive Michael Baden reviewed Savio's autopsy photographs. Drive Baden observed extensive bruising and scratch marks on Savio's back, torso, and face, and focused in particular on a large, unexplained laceration on her scalp. He concluded that Savio was most likely drowned following a physical struggle, or that the drowning itself may have been staged. Based on this independent review, Will County State's Attorney James Glasgow launched an official reinvestigation. On November 16, 2007, Kathleen Savio's body was exhumed for a new forensic examination. The results of this official autopsy supported Glasgow's position. On February 21, 2008, Glasgow publicly announced that a forensic pathologist had ruled Savio's death a homicide, stating that it was a carefully staged murder made to look like an accidental death. The announcement shocked the public, as it suggested that a former police officer had killed his wife 3 years earlier. As the reinvestigation continued, Peterson's past actions and statements were closely scrutinized. With little direct physical evidence, prosecutors determined that statements Stacy Peterson had made while she was alive were critical to the case. Stacy had told her church pastor, Neil Shorey, that on the night Savio died, Peterson asked her to help create a false alibi and had confessed to killing Savio. While these statements were essential to the prosecution, they faced a major legal obstacle under normal rules of evidence. Hearsay statements from a witness who is deceased or unavailable are generally not allowed in court. In response, the Will County State's Attorney's Office took an unprecedented legal step. In 2008, the Illinois legislature passed 725 ILCS 511510.6, commonly known as Drew's Law, specifically in connection with the Peterson case. The law allows reliable hearsay statements to be admitted as evidence if prosecutors can prove that the defendant killed or caused the disappearance of a witness in order to prevent that person from testifying. The law sparked intense controversy within the criminal justice system. Peterson's defense attorneys argued that it violated the Sixth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, which guarantees a defendant the right to confront witnesses against them. Prosecutors, however, maintained that Stacy had been killed or disappeared to prevent her from exposing Peterson's crimes, and they sought to use the law to introduce her statements at trial. Ultimately, on May 7, 2009, Drew Peterson was formally indicted by a Will County grand jury on charges of murdering Kathleen Savio, and his bail was set at $20 million. Peterson was taken into custody, marking the complete collapse of his former status as a respected police sergeant. This indictment represented a turning point. Without Stacy Peterson's disappearance, Savio's death might have remained permanently classified as an accident. Stacy's disappearance triggered the reinvestigation, which in turn led to Peterson's prosecution, finally bringing the tragic connection between the two wives into the courtroom. Even while incarcerated, Peterson attempted to manage his finances, including filing a lawsuit against a bank that had canceled his home equity line of credit, in order to cover legal expenses. The evolving legal battles surrounding his trial, particularly the debate over the admissibility of hearsay evidence, signaled the next phase of a case that continued to captivate national attention. When Drew Peterson's trial for the murder of Kathleen Savio began in the summer of 2012, the case entered its most serious legal crisis. Because there was very little direct physical evidence, the outcome of the trial depended almost entirely on whether the court would allow hearsay statements to be admitted as evidence. Prosecutors sought to introduce statements that Stacy Peterson and Kathleen Savio had made while they were alive to family members, friends, and a church pastor, describing Peterson's violent behavior and his confessions to murder. These statements strongly supported the theory that Drew Peterson killed Savio, staged her death as an accident, and later silenced Stacy to keep her from speaking out. Early in the proceedings, in July 2010, trial judge Stephen White issued a critical ruling after lengthy hearings. He decided that even if prosecutors could show by a preponderance of the evidence that Peterson had killed both women, most of Stacy Peterson's hearsay statements were not reliable enough to be admitted. The judge ruled that they failed to meet even the preponderance of the evidence standard required for deciding admissibility, let alone the much higher beyond a reasonable doubt standard needed for a criminal conviction. This decision was a devastating blow to the prosecution, which was relying almost entirely on the victim's prior statements. Due to the lack of physical evidence. Following the ruling, media outlets including the Chicago Tribune reported that the case was likely headed for a mistrial. Throughout the trial, Peterson's defense attorney, Joel Brodsky, aggressively argued that admitting hearsay evidence would violate Peterson's constitutional rights. He claimed that Peterson was being denied his Sixth Amendment right to confront and cross-examine the witness against him, namely Stacey Peterson. The defense accused prosecutors of trying to bypass the Constitution by relying on the special legislation known as Drew's Law. The trial stalled amid these legal obstacles, and the defense moved for a mistrial. Prosecutors, however, did not back down. In April 2012, they took the case to the Illinois Appellate Court. The appellate court overturned the trial court's ruling and allowed prosecutors to use 8 of Stacey Peterson's statements. Instead of relying solely on Drew's Law, the court applied the broader common law doctrine of forfeiture by wrongdoing. Under this principle, if a defendant kills or eliminates a witness to prevent testimony or to conceal a crime, the defendant forfeits the right to object to that witness's hearsay statements. The appellate ruling effectively recognized that Peterson had lost his right to confront Stacey by causing her disappearance, and it gave prosecutors a decisive opportunity to revive a case that had been on the verge of collapse. With the appellate decision in place, the trial moved forward. In addition to hearsay evidence, prosecutors presented circumstantial evidence and testimony from Peterson's friends and relatives. One of the most damaging witnesses was Peterson's longtime friend Jeff Pachter, who testified that Peterson had offered him $25,000 to find someone to kill Savio, and said it would be a secret he would take to his grave. This testimony stood out as direct evidence of Peterson's criminal intent, even amid the controversy surrounding hearsay evidence. Stacey's sister, Cassandra Cales, also raised persistent suspicions, testifying that Peterson had expressed a willingness to take a polygraph test regarding the blue containers seen at his garage shortly before Stacey disappeared. Meanwhile, Peterson's stepbrother, Thomas Morphy, became so distressed by the possibility that he had been involved in disposing of Stacey's body that he attempted suicide. The statements and actions of those around Peterson added to the gravity of the case. During the trial, there were moments of crisis, including an incident in which prosecutors attempted to introduce evidence that had not been approved by the court. However, when the defense withdrew its request for a mistrial, the proceedings continued toward a final verdict. In the end, Drew Peterson's murder trial became a complex legal case study for attorneys, illustrating the difficult balance between hearsay evidence and constitutional rights, and for the jury, it was an extraordinarily challenging task to determine the truth amid circumstantial evidence and highly contested testimony. On September 6, 2012, after intense courtroom battles and complex arguments over hearsay evidence, Drew Peterson's fate was decided. A Will County jury found the former police officer guilty of the first-degree murder of his third wife, Kathleen Savio. The verdict marked the climax of the case and the moment when Peterson's long-suspected crimes were finally proven in court. Even without a murder weapon or eyewitnesses, jurors relied on circumstantial and indirect evidence, including Stacey Peterson's hearsay statements, which had been admitted under the appellate court's ruling, and testimony from Peterson's friend Jeff Pachter. In particular, the jury found Stacey's statements that Peterson killed Savio and staged her death as an accident to be credible. The verdict demonstrated the powerful legal impact of admitting hearsay under Drew's Law. Following the conviction, sentencing took place on February 21, 2013. Peterson asked for a new trial just before sentencing, but the request was denied. The judge sentenced him to 38 years in prison for the murder of Kathleen Savio. The sentence reflected the court's condemnation of a brutal crime committed by a former law enforcement officer who had abused his position of trust. Peterson was sent to Menard Correctional Center in Chester, Illinois, bringing his public life to a complete end. At the time, he was in his late 50s, making the 38-year sentence effectively a life sentence. However, Peterson's criminal behavior did not stop after his incarceration. On February 9, 2015, he was charged with 2 additional serious felonies: solicitation of murder and solicitation of murder for hire, for attempting to have Will County State's Attorney James Glasgow, the prosecutor who had secured his conviction, killed. Investigators learned that Peterson had asked a fellow inmate to arrange the killing. That inmate immediately alerted authorities and agreed to wear a wire, recording conversations with Peterson that provided crucial evidence. The plot revealed that Peterson remained unrepentant and consumed by revenge against the justice system. On May 31, 2016, Peterson was found guilty of the solicitation charges. The conviction made clear that he remained a danger even while behind bars. On July 29, 2016, he was sentenced to an additional 40 years in prison for those crimes. Combined with his original 38-year sentence, Peterson's total prison term became 78 years, effectively ensuring he would spend the rest of his life in prison. Following this second conviction, his police pension was also terminated. After receiving the consecutive sentences, Peterson was transferred multiple times for security reasons. Under the supervision of the Illinois Department of Corrections, he was moved from an Illinois state prison to the federal prison in Terre Haute, Indiana, and in December 2019, he was transferred again to an out-of-state facility. For safety and security reasons, officials have not publicly disclosed his current location, classifying him as an interstate transfer inmate. On September 21, 2017, the Illinois Supreme Court denied Peterson's final appeal in the Kathleen Savio murder case, making his conviction permanent and bringing his legal battles to an end. However, the unresolved disappearance of Stacey Peterson continues to prevent full closure. Drew Peterson's story ending with a 78-year prison sentence remains one of the most disturbing and widely discussed examples of betrayal, abuse of power, and violence within the American justice system. Although Drew Peterson has been sentenced to a total of 78 years in prison and is being held in an out-of-state facility under the authority of the Illinois Department of Corrections, his case remains unfinished. The true ending of this story depends on one unanswered question: what happened to his fourth wife, Stacey Ann Peterson? Since October 28, 2007, her body has never been found, and even from prison, Peterson continues to insist that Stacey voluntarily left with another man, despite the fact that Stacey's disappearance triggered the reinvestigation into Kathleen Savio's death and ultimately led to Peterson's conviction. Stacey's own case remains unsolved to this day. The seriousness of Stacey's disappearance is heightened by how closely it matches Peterson's past pattern of domestic violence and threats, particularly toward his second wife, Vicki Connolly. As Connolly later testified, Peterson openly claimed that he knew how to kill a wife and make it look like an accident, a chilling statement that appears to align with what likely happened in the Savio case. After Stacey vanished, her family and investigators focused on reports involving blue plastic containers and a 55-gallon drum seen near Peterson's home, but they were never able to recover definitive evidence or locate Stacey's remains. Stacey was a devoted mother who deeply loved her 2 biological children and 2 stepchildren, making Peterson's claim that she voluntarily cut off all contact and disappeared completely unacceptable to her family. Even while incarcerated, Peterson has continued to deny his guilt and pursue legal action. In October 2021, he submitted a handwritten post-conviction relief petition from prison to the Will County Clerk. In that filing, Peterson alleged that state's attorney James Glasgow, who prosecuted his 2012 murder trial, had improperly intimidated witnesses. In the same petition, Peterson disclosed that he was being held at the Indiana State Prison in Michigan City, Indiana, detailed that correctional authorities had not publicly released for security reasons. These actions show that Peterson remains deeply distrustful of the justice system and driven by resentment, even years into his sentence. The most recent controversy in the case came from Peterson's former defense attorney, Joel Brodsky. In media interviews, Brodsky claimed that he possesses confidential information protected by attorney-client privilege, specifically knowledge of what happened to Stacey Peterson and where her body is buried, and said he has considered making that information public. He stated, "I know everything about both of his wives. I know everything," expressing frustration that Peterson has never taken responsibility for Stacey's fate. Brodsky acknowledged that revealing such information could expose him to legal consequences, highlighting the ethical dilemma between attorney-client confidentiality and the public's interest in resolving a murder case. Stacey Peterson's sister, Cassandra, responded to Brodsky's statements with cautious hope. She said that any information he holds could be the final key to solving Stacey's disappearance and bringing long overdue closure to the family. Cassandra stated that if Brodsky chose to come forward, she would support him despite the legal risks. The controversy drew widespread media attention, raising questions about whether Brodsky's claims were genuine or merely an attempt to attract publicity. At the time, Brodsky had previously faced a temporary suspension of his law license for unrelated reasons and was reportedly subject to a gag order, preventing him from revealing confidential information about Peterson. The Drew Peterson case stands as one of the most disturbing examples in American criminal history. A former police officer who abused his authority and knowledge of law enforcement to commit crimes against his wives, attempted to cover them up, and even tried to have the prosecutor who convicted him murdered. While the justice system ultimately secured his conviction through the extraordinary use of hearsay evidence, the disappearance of Stacy Peterson without a body remains a painful and unresolved reality. Until the truth about her fate is revealed, the Drew Peterson case will remain an open wound, an unfinished mystery, and a chapter that can never truly be closed. That concludes today's case file. Please subscribe, like, and turn on notifications. We'll be back tomorrow with a new case and another mystery. Thank you for watching.